Coming up on 5 Minute News. At Brazil rallies, Bolsonaro deepens rift with Supreme Court. Taliban form all-male Afghan government. And in New York City, Biden calls climate everybody's crisis. It's Wednesday, September 8. I'm Anthony Davis. Tens of thousands of supporters of embattled right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro heeded his call and turned out at rallies on Tuesday as he stepped up his attacks on Brazil's Supreme Court and threatened to plunge the country into a constitutional crisis. Bolsonaro has been locked in a feud with the High Court, in particular a justice who had jailed several of the president's supporters for allegedly financing, organizing, or inciting violence or anti-democratic acts, or disseminating false information. In calling on his followers to take to the streets on Brazil's Independence Day in protest, Bolsonaro stirred fears among his foes that the demonstrations could erupt in violence akin to the January 6 riot at the US Capitol by supporters of then-President Donald Trump. But by late afternoon, there were no reports of any serious violence. Thomas Trauman, a political analyst, said Bolsonaro crossed the Rubicon on Tuesday. He escalated the crisis. You can't have a president who says, "I won't accept the rule of law," or says, "I will only accept laws I like." That's not a democracy, Trauman said. Bolsonaro spent almost 2 months calling on supporters to take part in Independence Day rallies around the country that could show his continuing political appeal despite slumping poll ratings and a string of setbacks. Some of his supporters carried signs and banners calling on the military to secure Bolsonaro's hold on power or demanding Congress and the Supreme Court be shut down. As with Trump in 2020, Bolsonaro has said he might reject the 2022 presidential election results if he loses. On Tuesday, the Taliban announced an all-male interim government for Afghanistan, stacked with veterans of their hardline rule from the 1990s and the 20-year battle against the US-led coalition, a move that seems unlikely to win the international support the new leaders desperately need to avoid an economic meltdown. Appointed to the key post of Interior Minister was Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is on the FBI's most wanted list with a $5 million bounty on his head and is believed to still be holding at least one American hostage. He headed the feared Haqqani network that is blamed for many deadly attacks and kidnappings. The announcement came hours after Taliban fired their guns into the air to disperse protesters in the capital of Kabul and arrested several journalists, the second time in less than a week that heavy-handed tactics were used to break up a demonstration. Drawn mostly from Afghanistan's dominant Pashtun ethnic group, the cabinet's lack of representation from other ethnic groups also seems certain to hobble its support from abroad. As much as 80% of Afghanistan's budget comes from the international community, and a long-running economic crisis has worsened in recent months. Near-daily flights from Qatar bring in humanitarian aid, but the needs are massive, and the Taliban can hardly afford isolation. Since taking over Afghanistan in mid-August after US troops withdrew, the Taliban have shown no indication they will hold elections. A policy statement accompanying the cabinet announcement sought to allay fears of Afghanistan's neighbours and the rest of the world, but was unlikely to calm the fears of women, who did not get a single post. President Joe Biden declared climate change everybody's crisis on Tuesday after touring neighborhoods severely damaged by the remnants of Hurricane Ida and said it's time for America to get serious about the danger or face ever worse loss of life and property. Biden spoke after walking streets in New Jersey and then Queens in New York, meeting people whose homes were devastated by flooding when the leftovers of Ida barreled through. The storm dumped records amount of rain onto an already saturated ground and was blamed for more than a dozen deaths in the city. The president said scientists, economists and others have warned about climate change for many years and that the situation had now reached code red proportions. The threat is here. It's not getting any better, Biden said in New York. The question is, can it get worse? We can stop it from getting worse. Biden said the threat from wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, and other extreme weather must be dealt with in ways that will lessen the devastating effects of climate change. We can't turn it back very much, but we can prevent it from getting worse, he said. Biden added that scientists have been warning for decades that this day would come and that urgent action was needed. Biden's plan to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure nationwide is pending in Congress, and the White House asked Congress on Tuesday for an additional $24 billion to cover the costs of Hurricane Ida and other natural disasters. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.